Have our witnesses as we continue with our Women's Economic Empowerment Study. I'm just going to give a brief IO letting you know. Interpretation on, make sure you choose interpretation. We speak in both French and English in this committee. Also, with your earpieces, make sure your earpieces aren't too close to your mic, or it really hurts our ladies' and gentlemen's ears in the interpretation. But we're back to today's Women's Economic Empowerment Study, and today we have 3 witnesses from the Canadian Health Food Association: Jules Gorham, who is the Director of Regulatory Affairs and Policy. Online, we have Réseau des Femmes d'Affaires du Québec, Ruth Vachon, who is the Chief Executive Officer online. And from 3M Canada, we have Penny Wise, who is the President and CAO. We are going to start with 5-minute opening remarks, and I'm going to pass the floor first to Jules. Jules, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Thank you for having me for this important conversation. Merci à tous d'avoir pris le temps de...
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to make a presentation to this important committee.
I am the Director of Regulatory Affairs and Policy at the Canadian Health Food Association. CHFA is Canada's largest trade association dedicated to natural, organic, and wellness products. The natural health product, NHP industry, is a vital component of Canada's economy. NHP businesses contribute $5.5 billion to the Canadian economy and $2.8 billion in taxable revenue. I am here today as one voice amongst the many who are deeply concerned about Health Canada's proposed changes to the NHP industry. In particular, I'd like to talk about the impact of these changes on women living in Canada. 82% of Canadians use NHPs. If you have brushed your teeth, worn sunscreen, applied deodorant, or taken a vitamin, then you too use NHPs. According to Stats Canada, women are much more likely to purchase NHPs to manage their health and wellness. It is critical to understand that every time a consumer chooses natural, they are already paying more. NHPs are not covered by health insurance programs and are subject to provincial and federal taxes. These tax dollars are estimated to amount to over $500 million a year. Health Canada's proposed changes will increase the cost of NHPs in Canada even further, unnecessarily burdening Canadians and disproportionately impacting women and women-owned businesses during a cost of living crisis. These changes will force businesses across the country to close. 1 in 5 are contemplating shutting down, with many micro, small, and medium-sized businesses already leaving Canada. The barrier to entry is high too, with a backlog licensing system and heavy pre-market processes. Profits are much less than what one would expect, as there is no patent protection for NHPs, minimizing research, funding, and making it difficult to attract investors, something 51% of women entrepreneurs are already challenged by. To bring an innovative product to market is already a costly undertaking. Health Canada's proposal adds another $58,000 price tag to the cost of every single novel product application. Over 80% of businesses in the sector are micro, small, or medium size. 51% are Canadian-owned and 28% are family-owned. Although the exact number of women-founded or women-led NHP companies is unknown, a recent Women in Nutraceuticals report indicates that 50% of small businesses in the sector do have a female CEO. 17% of companies attending CHFA's upcoming trade show are also women-owned. Unfortunately, it's a well-known fact that women have been historically neglected in research. There is a scarcity of data on women, and Health Canada's latest regulatory reform on NHPs is yet another example. Prior to publishing its proposal on cost recovery fees, Health Canada did not conduct any analysis on the impacts to Canadians, including a gender-based analysis. They left it to business owners to do the math and decide if they can afford to stay in business. We are deeply concerned about the impact of Health Canada's changes on the health of Canadians, particularly for the many women who rely on NHPs to maintain their health and wellness. While women-owned NHP businesses are responding to women's health needs, these micro and small-sized businesses can't afford to absorb the cost of the changes. Even the largest companies will be forced to reduce product selection by an estimated 20%, leaving far fewer options and almost nothing new on Canadian shelves. What has been falsely promoted by Health Canada as regulations to keep Canadians safe will actually send more and more Canadians to the internet, where unapproved, unsafe products can be shipped right to their doorstep. As someone who speaks to members of the NHP industry every day, it is abundantly clear to me that recklessly pushing through regulations will decimate the NHP industry, innovation, research, and our much-needed Canadian brands. It is my pleasure to try to peel back the numerous complex issues these regulatory changes will magnify and create for women across our country. The impacts to women need to be recognized by the Minister of Health before it's too late. I am but one voice, but I thank you for this opportunity to represent the women leading NHP businesses and the women and moms, like me, who choose natural to care for themselves and their families. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jules. We'll now go online to Ruth Vachon from the Réseau des Femmes d'Affaires du Québec. Ruth, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, members of the committee. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to be with you today to deal with the issue of economic empowerment. I'm the CEO of the Quebec Business Women's Network, a non-profit organization which helps increase the number of business women and help them succeed in Canada and across the world. We have been working in this area for 43 years in Quebec, and starting this year, we'll be able to work across Canada thanks to government assistance we've received. We support business women in developing their skills, widening their professional network, and conquering new local, national, and international markets. First, we'd like to underscore the important progress that has been made with regard to equality between women and men, but we have to remember that there are times when we go backwards. And, for example, between 2018 and 22, Canada lost 61,000 business women. 35,000 of those were in Quebec, almost 60% of those businesses that failed. And so a study from the site for knowledge for women entrepreneurs showed that the real problem for women entrepreneurs in Canada is that it's not an issue of creating businesses, founding businesses, but their growth, their development. And to stimulate growth, we've undertaken a pan-Canadian survey in 2020, and the results are very clear. 79% of business women are or identify the growth of their clientele as the number one problem in success and growth. And so we have to increase the number of clients. We can do that in a number of ways. And when we have to sell more to big businesses, when big businesses and institutions want to increase their supply chains, we have to include more women entrepreneurs and business. This is what we call diversification of suppliers and responsible and inclusive supply. It's important to know that women entrepreneurs represent fewer than 5% of suppliers for major corporations. And so there is an incredible opportunity, therefore, for women entrepreneurs. And according to Status of Women Canada, initiatives for diversity amongst suppliers have not been very well followed in the private or public sectors. And there are a number of potential reasons. For example, the absence of legislative or regulatory requirements and the lack of awareness about the entrepreneurs in questions. And so we are very much aware that this opportunity for a unique opportunity for growth for women entrepreneurs, the network has been working in this area for more than 12 years, and we've become an essential partner in the promotion and accompaniment of responsible supply. And in Quebec, for example, there's a program to accelerate the use of women entrepreneurs and suppliers. There have been 500 women entrepreneurs of all kinds that have been identified as an underrepresented group, and so they have received contracts with a number of large businesses, for example, for up to $81 million, these contracts. And we've also worked with major corporations. We've gone to knock at their doors, and we've made a lot of impressive progress. And we're working, therefore, with the corporations. We go and consult them with regard to the opportunities for women entrepreneurs. And the network, we want to go work with banks, send entrepreneurs to banks with contracts in their pockets, which makes approval of financing much more easy, and we underscore that government efforts to stimulate funding in comparison with that, simply supporting women entrepreneurs in getting access to the market is disproportionate. And for a more inclusive economy I'm sorry, you've used up your time.
The rest of your time shortly, and some of the things you just had a little bit more, but we'll let that go on. So we are now going to turn it on to Penny Wise. So Penny Wise online. Penny, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you today. Timely for me to be here to discuss women and economic impact, as it was International Day of Women and Girls in Science on Sunday. In Canada, women make up 47% of the workforce, but only 23% of science and technology workers and only 5% of trades workers. Yet science, technology, trades, engineering, mathematics, or STEM occupations are among the most highest paid and the fastest growing occupations in the country. These jobs are also critical to creating a net zero economy. Canada has ambitious plans to be a world leader in sustainable innovation, and to do this, we need many more people in STEM-related fields. As a science company known for innovation, creating equitable access to STEM education and jobs is an issue that 3M cares deeply about. We know that the best ideas, the biggest breakthroughs, and the growth opportunities ahead come when you have a diversity of perspective and input into solving a problem. In recent 3M Canada-sponsored studies on science and barriers to STEM in Canada for underrepresented groups, we found almost 70% of Canadians believe that our STEM workforce would benefit from diverse perspectives, that it would drive more innovative ideas, further enabling Canadian businesses, the academic community, and the broader industry to collectively come together to help solve some of our biggest problems. Since releasing those studies, we at 3M have focused on understanding the barriers that women and other underrepresented communities face when they choose STEM careers. And over the last 3 years, we've convened panels, experts, and advocates to understand the barriers, how to overcome them, and what businesses, academia, and governments can do. For 3M, for me personally, this advocacy committee has provided input on how we direct our philanthropy and where we should show up to be most effective in supporting STEM for women so we can take action. In our study on barriers to STEM, we sought a better view of the weighting of the barriers to STEM and to define someone's STEM journey. And so what we found was, for every woman, their experience in STEM, whether education or career, was different, but 71% of women reported encountering some type of barrier in pursuing a STEM career. And 40% of women believe that STEM is not an inclusive field because there are systemic barriers and biases that exist. What I found particularly heartbreaking in the work that we did in these studies was, as we looked at a woman's STEM journey from middle school through to finding a job, there was a tremendous dropout rate of STEM women in second year of university. You've gone through middle school, you've made it through high school, you've survived all the weed out courses of the beginning of university, only to give up after your second year. And so we identified several barriers to finding a STEM role for women. Financial burdens top of the list. STEM education continues to be one of the most expensive educations to obtain. Where jobs are located made it fiscally challenging for women to participate. Women didn't necessarily have a full view to the kinds of roles that you could take on in STEM and believed only low-paying jobs were available to them. There's an assumption that a STEM degree means you'll work in a lab, or if you're in skilled trades, it's dirty. But there's a world of opportunity that is not clear to people. There's a lack of champions and mentors. Not only do women need mentors, but they need supportive leaders who lift them up and find them opportunities. Every single one of us here today has benefited from someone in our working career who has opened a door for us. 24% of women who started in a STEM career changed roles. That's a quarter of women have changed roles. And they did that because they were unhappy in the field and they didn't know what else they could do. 13% of women said there was an inability to manage their personal commitments and choices, whether it's children in daycare or elder care or other home commitments. Women in STEM, just like all women in the economy, face this challenge. And at worst, women faced a hostile work environment. 16% of women who responded said they left because of a hostile work environment. At best, 11% said they were working in an environment where they didn't feel like they belonged. And for other underrepresented groups, such as racialized, Indigenous, or LGBTQ+ members, similar barriers, but different proportions, and intersectionality makes the barriers more pronounced and complicated. So traditional approaches, as we think about recommendations, are not necessarily moving the needle fast enough for our STEM economic needs. and we have a handful of recommendations, but I bet I'm almost out of time and I could
You have
probably
30
provide
seconds,
those.
Penny.
Okay, so perfect. So there's some things around building EDI into the future work environment, creating champions, developing a focused industrial policy for Canada, and flexibility, and moving to actions and how we come together to drive actions.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to let you know when we talk, I'm just going to put a little plug in for Penny Wise here. When we talk about that leadership, we also see it when it comes to the philanthropy from 3M, and we know that that makes a big difference. As I think you were the champion for the United Way campaign last year, correct? You were the...
I was 2 years ago, but
Two
thank
years
you,
ago.
yes.
Yes. So thank you very much. I'm going to just bring it to the committee because we have 20 minutes left on our time. We do have the availability to go further on today because of resources being extended to us because of votes. I just want to look at the committee, whether we go one round or whether we try to extend it to 2 full rounds, which would then take us to closer to 1:30. So we could go to our regular 1 o'clock or 1:30, and I'm just looking for the will of the committee on how we would like to proceed.
I can't, Chair,
Okay.
today.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we're going to be doing is
So
we will be
sorry.
having a 24-minute round, 6, 6, 6, and 6. I would ask that everybody divide it as you see accordingly. So I'm going to now pass the floor over to Anna and split your time amongst your groups. Okay? 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for joining us today. So I have a question for Ms. Gorham. Did I say that right? You did. Oh, great. Thank you. So I listened to your intro, and it was quite interesting. So the question I have for you is, why would the government pass this legislation that affects women on the national health products? Like, maybe you could help me understand that.
Yeah, I'm still trying to kind of wrap my brain around it as well. What we do have is it's a piece of regulation. So it's a cost recovery proposal. It's been proposed in the name of ministerial order, so by the Minister of Health. What we do know from the proposal is that the, I'll say the cabinet directive on how to properly come up with regulations does include gender-based analysis. It includes such thing as early consultation with Indigenous peoples. Those steps in the making of these particular regulations were skipped. They failed to do those. So the implications that we are now hearing from industry every single day, the implications that we outlined in our response to that proposal when it was in Gazette 1 have pointed that out. However, a proper analysis on the impacts, gender-based marginalized communities, has still not yet been done.
So what I'm hearing is that there wasn't really a pilot project or enough research done to see the impacts that it does, because as you stated, 51% of women are in this industry. So thank you very much for sharing that. I think there's a lesson here to be learned that we can't ignore women because we're pretty good. So thank you for that. My next question is for Penny, Ms. Wise. So my question is, what were the barriers or struggles that you experienced prior to your role as president or CEO? I come from the banking industry, and I know it took a long time for women to excel in the executive positions. So could you share with us what your challenges were?
This is a really fascinating question that I have been asked before, and I think that working for 3M has actually put me in a very unique position in terms of the kind of support and focus that this company has put on women. And I guess I use it as an example of how other companies can think about it. 3M has had a very specific policy about making sure that leadership in the company is at least 50% women. And so they have had an incredible amount of support through time and over the years. Whether it was finding me new opportunities to stretch or putting me into roles that I didn't expect to have, or opportunities to get in front of leadership or learn or go to trainings or network with others that perhaps other companies may or may not choose to do. And so I see all of those as opportunities that that were given to me that could have been potential challenges. I would also say that if there were ever to have been a challenge that 3M was lovely in helping me overcome was I raised 2 children, 2-income family. My husband and I are with our careers, and always very flexible in terms of how we worked and where we worked, even more so. Even further developed as we moved into the pandemic. So I think those could be challenges for women, but for me, they turned into opportunities and supports because of the kind of company and direction on inclusion that 3M has had in my 24 years of being here.
So thank you very much for that, and I appreciate the comments, because I think women do have a lot to give to this country, and I think we can learn from both you ladies. So thank you. I'm going to pass the last few minutes to my colleague Dominique.
Merci Anna. Bonjour à vous.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the witnesses. Ms. Vachon, thank you for being here. I'm happy to see you here with us. And you talked about women, business women, and business heads don't have much access to public tenders. I think that's what I understood. And have you been able to maneuver across this context? And have you ever managed to get any contracts? And so, what's the basis for this problem when there are these kinds of tenders? Is it just that women don't know how to navigate the process? And as a government, as a committee, what would you like to see in our report to suggest how to overcome this problem? Sorry, thank you. Yes, so the situation, I mean, there are two. There's a private market and the public tenders. With regard to big businesses, there are women represent fewer than 5% of suppliers, and with regard to, it's not an issue of bad will. I think that women need more help to insert themselves into their supply chain. And I think that there should be a diversification program within the companies to help women access their supply chain. And I think that with regard to their supplies, they should try and find someone who could really make a contribution, not just the traditional suppliers. With regard to the government, since there isn't
that evil person that has to cut you off because we're over time on this. I know you have lots more to add, and at the end of the committee, I will be putting in some comments. But I do need to pass it over for the next 6 minutes, and I'll pass it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to turn back to Ms. Wise from 3M. I noticed you were quoted in an article in the Financial Post last year, and one thing you said is that it's important for us to make sure we're making the economy, making jobs, making opportunities available and attractive to women. And I thought that was a really key statement to make. Would you explain to us exactly how you make these jobs more attractive to women? I know you've gotten into that a little bit in some of your previous testimony, but maybe you can expand.
Thank you. I think one of the most important learnings that I've had over the last few years as I've examined women in STEM roles especially is this idea of, like you said, making roles attractive, but making sure women and people interested in STEM careers in general understand the breadth and depth of what STEM careers are available to you, and that it's important that people understand that it's not just working in a lab, or it's not just working in that trades are different, and that it's about making sure people so women understand that, but it's also about companies embracing EDI and embracing inclusion and making sure that they are building workplaces that are engaging, that are recognizing of flexibility, of supportive of women, of lifting women up, of providing champions, of providing mentors. So I think there's like a number of different elements that come together. I can't speak enough about the importance of champions. that you need people to lift you up, that it's more than just seeing people as a role model, but it's people to help lift you up. So it's both of those pieces. So I think there's several elements that really help create an engaging environment where women want to come and work in these roles.
Thank you. And you also said that it's never been more pressing since the pandemic to devote greater focus to women's presence and achievement. You've really talked a lot about the need for more women in all kinds of different workplaces. Would you explain further to this committee why that's so important?
When I came back to be president of 3M Canada 6 weeks before the pandemic started, and what I saw was women more adversely affected by all of the shutdowns and closures and what happened during the pandemic, because so many women are part of the service industry, which was the most hard hit during the pandemic. And what I saw at that time was policy and support of women and what was happening around the pandemic sliding back to the 1970s, or somebody said the 1960s. I have a 26-year-old daughter, and what I wanted to be able to do was pass the torch to her, that she could stand on my shoulders, not slide back. And so that's why I think we need to focus and push hard, and why I've been so passionate about making sure we're continuing to move women ahead, that we're talking about STEM, that we're finding these high growth opportunities, growth sectors, an industrial policy that it's very clear where the jobs need to come from, so that people can train, reskill, upskill, whatever it is we want to call it, so that we have the right talent here in Canada, and that women are properly represented in the talent across all of the jobs that we need to grow the economy in this country.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the leadership of all the women in this room today. I would like to turn to Ms. Vachon pour un petit instant. Je voudrais
Ms. Vachon, very quickly, I'd like to be able to speak to ask my question in French, but I'm going to go back to English.
Entrepreneurship strategy. We've got helping women access money, helping women export and improve knowledge, and create more data on women and entrepreneurship. Would you give us your impressions of this program, how it's working, and what more we can do to help women achieve excellence?
I think that program has allowed us to make some good progress, and to have an overall view of the situation, something we didn't have in the past. And I think that it provides a list of all the actors in the ecosystem, and now there are a lot of. There's been the women entrepreneurs, and then the links with the major businesses, as Ms. Wise said. I think there has to be a productivity chain or a supply chain take into account women entrepreneurs. And we have a lot of work to do. We work with a wide variety of women entrepreneurs. And what's great about that is that they are not from one specific sector. They represent all the sectors in the economy. And so, yes, there's a funding problem, but we also have great challenges for access to market for our women, and it's very important to provide ways for them to access the markets. Do you have any more ideas about how we could do that? To facilitate women entrepreneurs' access to funding or to the markets? Well, I think that it's not really money. It's the access. Access means helping women access companies and to identify challenges so that they can be part of the solution.
We'll now pass it over to Adrienne LaRoche. Excellent French, Lisa. We're going to pass it over to Adrienne. Adrienne, you've got the floor, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, I'd like to thank our three witnesses for this very important study. And it's unfortunate that we have so little time for them today. I had a lot of questions, and I think it's very important that this study of empowerment, and I've worked with chairs the trade associations in my area, chambers of commerce, and I think we have to help women become independent. It's very important for for achieving their full potential. It's very sad that we don't have enough time. So, Ms. Vachon, after being you've been named one of the 100 most influential women in Canada. Bravo! And I think I've heard you already speak in a conference in Sherbrooke, and it was very, very interesting. And I think that you also have at the meeting of Francophone entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, you were appointed to represent Quebec within the 5 women entrepreneur associations in the world. Bravo! And what can you tell us about your contacts with other groups and at the international level and things that could be pertinent and for women entrepreneurs in Canada? I think that what we try to do is assist women, Canadian women, access new markets. And I think that we want to make other markets, the more than 100 markets and associations in the world more aware of women entrepreneurs in Canada. And I think this is a very important step for the future of our business. We don't have to go and actually be located there, but we can cooperate with organizations and businesses across the world, and we can provide very interesting solutions for greater growth. And so you've started because you've talked about diversification of suppliers and I would like to give you a bit of time to finish that answer. You didn't have time earlier. Well, thank you very much. We say that we've been working in this area for 12 years, and with the pandemic, for example, we've had to accelerate these efforts. And since 2004, there was a real change with regard to supply and responsible supply. And I think this will be a way for all women entrepreneurs to win and to make interesting contributions, worthwhile contributions to our economy. I think we've got a great deal of work to do still to improve the situation further. And we have a group of innovators. We have to promote innovation. I think even that is even more important than funding in ensuring growth and strengthening women entrepreneurs and their presence in the economy. And I think that we have to ensure that there are more and more women entrepreneurs, and we have to keep working. And Ms. Vachon, you talked about the problems or times where there's 61,000 women in Quebec, women entrepreneurs who had to stop their activities. Between 2018 and 22, we lost 61,000 women managed businesses. So almost 60% of the women-owned businesses across Canada that closed were in Quebec. So for us, this was a very important challenge. And yes, and Ms. Vachon, we know that Quebec is one of the hotbeds of women entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurship. And I know that we have a number of very innovative women entrepreneurs. And you talked about flexibility. And lately there's been a challenge, I believe, that the emergency benefits, there seems to be a lack of flexibility. How has that affected women entrepreneurs? And How is flexibility in federal programs, how can that have a direct effect on women entrepreneurs and many of these smaller businesses? How can we adapt federal programs to better help women entrepreneurs? I think that I am a member of the WEDOC Association, and we have funds for women entrepreneurs. We would have liked women to have access to a second chance for funding, and that would be important for them, I believe. So your recommendation, if we talk about federal programs for women, because and often the women businesses, their type of business doesn't enter into the categories provided for by the government.
Get over to Leah. Leah, 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. So my first question is for Penny Wise. You spoke about intersectionalities and barriers. So in my former life for 3 minutes, I was a vice principal in a First Nation, and one of the reasons why we couldn't teach the science curriculum is because we didn't have a science lab. So, for example, the kids in the school couldn't take chemistry because we didn't have proper safety equipment to teach chemistry. In your research, when you're talking about intersectionalities, did you find that particularly in remote or First Nations communities, one of the barriers is equal access to education in terms of being able to join STEM fields?
So I think that is relevant across a number of whether racialized communities, Indigenous communities, and making sure that there is funding and having access. But accessibility in general is an issue for engaging people in STEM and students and individuals in STEM across Canada, and that really. Whether it's accessibility for people with disabilities, like actually being able to get into the lab, or people being able to be taught in a way that is relevant and meaningful to them. So yes, I guess the short answer to your question is yes, there is definitely a lack of funding and lack of accessibility. And that is one of the pieces that we look at as a recommendation is how do we create accessibility to STEM education and give people and give students the opportunity to engage with science, chemistry, all of those elements that you spoke about.
I also just, as a side note, it was hard to promote a love of reading because we had no library books. But anyway, talk about educational, educational inequality in this country.
Yes.
My next question is for Madame Jules Gorham. So you spoke about, your concerns with new legislation that impact kind of like natural medicines. What were some of the reasons given for putting the need to put in the legislation?
So it's all, I'm still in shock about the library, sorry. It's all under the self-care framework. So many years ago, HESA played a big role in this, actually. It was decided that OTCs, over-the-counter medications, our Tylenols, our allergy meds, et cetera, along with natural health products, along with cosmetics, would go under a self-care framework because they are essentially low-risk products. So it was taking them away from drugs and moving them under their own framework. That framework, many years later, is still incomplete. The building out of it is still incomplete. There's many operational problems still being had in the framework. The cost recovery portion of it was rushed through. It was scheduled to come on later down the pipeline. We were expecting a lot of stakeholder consultation, engagement, costing exercises to be done. It was rushed through this summer with almost less than 24 hours notice for stakeholders. And we're now sitting with a cost recovery proposal that was in Gazette 1 and is, hopefully we can push it off, but it was set to be enforced as April 1st, 2025.
So what you're saying is that there's no coverage for natural medicines. Is that what the big issue is? That
what we're saying is that they're changing the regulations of natural health products without taking into consideration the impact to Canadians, the impact to businesses, the entire supply chain. If we talk about women in STEM, the entire supply chain is women in STEM, the women who have roles to bring products that allow women to care for their families to market. That's all in jeopardy right now in Canada because of these regulations being pushed through.
Okay, great. Thank you. My next question is for Penny Wise. You indicated that many women in STEM experience a hostile environment. Can you expand on that?
Unfortunately, I can't provide you a lot more detail. It was very specific. Have you encountered a hostile work environment? Do you feel not included? So I don't have specifics about what they mean by hostile work environment. But certainly in any sort of company where maybe less than a quarter of the women who are working inside a lab or inside a STEM occupation are in an environment where they are not necessarily brought in or part of the organization, or they are not supported or treated appropriately. I can see how, one, at the very least, they would feel not included. Certainly, to understand the hostile working environment, we would need to dig into it further.
And in terms of, you spoke about STEM building sustainable economies. You also spoke about the need for diverse perspectives. How is the lack of representation of women in STEM, how does that impact in terms of coming up with innovative solutions that will allow us to move forward?
So I fundamentally believe that inclusion, so when you think about a problem, when you have a room full of people who are all from the same group, have the same ways of thinking, have the same blinders or views to working on a problem, we're going to solve a problem in a very specific way. When you look outside of that, group, when you have people, women with different opinions, with different life experiences, with different educations, with different points of view, with different ways of thinking through problems or solving problems, when you start to bring in some of these other ideas, when you start to bring in some of these other opinions, or people who have been, exposed to, whether it's, indigenous on the land, or our connection to the land, or different views, or different cultures, different ways of thinking about things, different medicines. All of those bring different ideas that make people think more broadly, that make people think widely, and that's how we get to a better solution.
Well, thank you so much. On behalf of the committee, I would really like to thank Jules, Penny, and Ruth for coming to our committee and providing some information here. If there's additional information, because I know our time was so short today, if there's additional information, questions that you thought you might be asked that you weren't asked, please send us in some information. I also note that I have here some recommendations that were put in on Pennywise, so I'll ask that the speaking notes also get passed around, because Penny had provided recommendations on there. Seeing no other questions. Oh, yes, Marky.
Madam Chair, just since we didn't have a lot of time, if the witnesses want to write anything in to the committee. Yeah, no, but both, so not just Penny.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no.
That was just Penny.
No, it was everybody, but I had mentioned about Penny. I had recommendations specifically on this paper that I wanted to make sure got out. Seeing no other questions or comments, I will see you Thursday, 3:30. Meeting adjourned.